Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar on studying in the USA. My name is Louisa. I'm the Education USA Manager here at Fulbright, and I'm presenting today with my colleague.
Hi everyone, I'm Abby. I'm an Education USA advisor here at Fulbright Commission, and excited to talk to you guys today.
So just to let you know that this webinar will be recorded, we're going to be covering the basics of studying in the USA. We're going to be talking a little about choosing the right university for you, all of the funding options that are available in the US, and also we'll be going through the application process in some more detail. Just to let you know that we will be taking questions at the end, so you'll be able to enter these into the Q&A box, and we'll come looping back at the end and answer as many as we can. Just to let you know, I'll repeat it again later on, but if we haven't got time to answer your specific questions, please do reach out to us on advising@fulbright.org.uk, and we'll be very happy to come back to you via email as well. So what is Education USA? So we are an advisory service that is part of a global network, and we come under the umbrella of the US Department of Education. Education USA has over 400 advising centers across the world that help guide international students on US study and all the processes that are involved. So in the UK, we're based at the US-UK Fulbright Commission in London. The Commission and Education USA are paired up to help people explore education in the US, and at graduate level, the Commission grants a number of awards and scholarships to talented students. And our aim as Education USA advisors is to offer free and unbiased advice to help UK students study in the US, and we're very happy to be here today to talk a little bit about the undergraduate experience. So first of all, we're going to go into why study in the USA. As you know, there are many options here in the UK. And here are just a few points that we think kind of stand out to UK students. So first of all, we have reputation and variety of US universities. So there are over 4,500 US universities offering undergraduate degrees. That's compared to only about 120 in the UK, so that's a huge difference. And within that 4,500, there's a huge range of personality and style. US universities are known for their reputation. There's a full range of programs on offer, and they also produce groundbreaking research. So we'd advise focusing on fit, and you'll hear that a lot throughout this presentation, as this will allow you to find many high quality unis that you may not have heard of before. So opportunity to experience campus life and activities is also a big draw. US universities are known for having vibrant campus life, and also they encourage students to be involved outside of the classroom. So some examples of extracurricular involvement can include music, so a cappella, orchestras, dance groups, many different types of sports which you can play at different levels. And we even have an example here of Wisconsin University, where they offer log rolling, which is quite niche, but I'm sure some people enjoy that out there. And it's also focused on liberal arts and that kind of style of teaching. So this is a top attraction for UK students wanting to study at US universities, as they follow this idea of a liberal arts curriculum, which equates to a very well-rounded education. And what this means is that you have a flexibility to explore interests before selecting a major. And we'll go into that a little bit later. But the emphasis is really on the teaching, providing an engaging classroom environment. So you can take a combination of different study topics, for example, engineering and art, so two very different things that you can take at the same time, and no one can dictate what you can and can't do. History and chemistry, music and physics. So, for example, a student who switched from biomedical engineering to global gender studies after taking a class on feminism, like that can happen. That's completely up to the student and they can find their own path. And this is very different to the UK, where you have a more restricted pathway and you choose your subject focus before you even start university. So believe it or not, funding opportunities is also quite a top attraction. So it's surprising to some, and I will discuss a bit later in more detail, but there are so many opportunities to find a variety of scholarships in the US compared to the more loan-based program in the UK, which is Student Finance England. Another great thing is that studying abroad internationalizes your CV. So it's very appealing to employers. It shows that you have a boldness to do something different. It shows you have interpersonal skills, experience in cross-cultural communication too. It gives you the opportunity to build networks of friends and professional contacts around the world. It also opens up job opportunities. So whilst you're out there, you can actually work 20 hours a week during term time, 40 hours a week during holidays, and then you can work in the US for up to a year after graduation. And of course, the final point here is learning about a new culture. So this tends to be a big pull to international students who want to experience the US and all it has to offer. The US spans across 6 time zones and has a great diversity in geography and cultures. You also get really long summer holidays, so you can use these to explore, and some of those friendships you make may also take you across the country. Just living on campus will also help you get to know more about this through your roommates, classmates, all the activities you might get involved with, and also the national holidays. So I thought it would be quite important to look at the key differences between UK undergrad study and US undergrad study. So the duration is the first thing. So typically in the US, programs are longer. So you have 4-year bachelor's degree versus typically three in the UK. Admissions to the university is as a whole. So you're not applying to a particular academic department, just like here in the UK you would. And this reflects liberal arts. You may not have to even choose your major or what you graduate in until late, compared to the very course-specific degrees in the UK. So you have the US, where you apply to the university as a whole, compared to the UK, where you're applying to take a specific subject in a specific department. There's also less government control and less standardization. So the positive from this is that there is more institutional diversity and freedom. So that's where the uniqueness of the universities come from. However, there are no set fees or no centralized admissions process. So there's no equivalent to UCAS. The application process is slightly longer and more in-depth because the admission process is more holistic and much more than just grades. So they're looking at your extracurriculars and your values and your strengths as a person as a whole, and not just how academically focused you are. Like I said, no equivalent to UCAS, but our guides, which are also available on our website, are there to help you navigate this process. So you can apply for funding alongside your application for admissions and not after you're admitted. So please, if funding is important for you, and you're going to hear this so many times during this webinar, please consider this from the very start. There are some exceptions with studying undergrad in the US. So law and medicine are 2 subjects that cannot be studied at undergraduate level. They are postgrad only. So if you're heart set on studying law or medicine, UK pathways may be better for you because you'll be able to get those degrees quicker, faster, and cheaper. So I wanted to highlight some key terminology differences between the 2 systems. So when you're going on the websites and doing your research on universities in the US, you might come across some language which is different to how we interpret here in the UK. So first of all, US high school or grades 9 to 12 correspond directly to UK secondary school years 10 to 13 in England and Wales, years 11 to 14 in Northern Ireland, and S3 to S6 in Scotland. So just bear in mind that they are a little bit different. In the US, college, university, school, institution, all equals the same. It's all what we in the UK refer to as university. And just bear in mind that the term college in the US does not mean that the degree is worth less. And in fact, it is the most common term used out there for university across the States. In the US, you have various classes or courses. And here in the UK, we would call those modules. Your degree program in the US or your major is the same as the UK course. So this is, sorry about that. This is a helpful slide for you to come back to when you're navigating those university websites. So what does the application timeline look like? So we recommend beginning to research universities 12 to 18 months before enrollment, and that is typically at the end of year 12. Sounds like a lot of time, but trust me, you're going to need to spend that time doing your research because there's so much out there to explore. So register for any requirement admission exams and aim to take this in the summer after year 12. So we'll talk about admission exams a little bit later, but if you are required to take these, you'll be looking at year 12, the summer after year 12. A lot of universities do not require these, so it completely depends on where you're applying to. So you will then finalize selection of where you'll be applying to in early autumn of year 13, or around about 10 to 12 months before you plan to enroll. And I will go over strategies of how to do this later on. And then about 8 to 10 months, or in the autumn of year 13, you'll start to put together your applications and submit according to the deadlines. But keep in mind that deadlines will vary from university to university. Again, there is no set way of doing things, and every university will have their different rules, different dates that you need to keep in mind. So in the spring of year 13, or around 4 to 7 months before enrollment, you can expect to hear back from the universities you apply to with their admissions decisions, hopefully with some good news. And based off of where you're accepted, you'll notify universities of your decision and apply for a visa 1 to 3 months before enrollment. So there are loads of resources on our website to help you with pre-departure, including travel advice, living arrangements, campus life, etc. So please do check this out. And just so you know, US universities typically start around mid-August to early September, so that's slightly earlier than here in the UK. So how do you go about choosing a university? Choosing is an important step in the process of applying to US university, and it's important that you give enough of your time to this. So our top tip is that you spend 90% of your time and effort in the researching and choosing phase of this process. So 90% on choosing the universities you're interested in, and 10% only in the applying, so the application. It's important to think through the step, and the key is to be flexible and open-minded. Like I said at the start, there are over 4,500 unis in the US, which is a very daunting process as you look to narrow down your prospects. But we're going to discuss some strategies that you can implement in the choosing. So what are some of the important things to consider in the choosing process? So it's important to know the context of the US as you research applying to US study and choosing which institutions you'd like to apply to. For example, there is no national set standard for universities. So universities are free to choose their own set of fees, their own course structures, their student environments, etc. This is compared to the UK, where institutions have set fees and they have fairly similar environments and fields. What that does mean is that there is so much variety and diversity amongst institutions, which we touched on as being one of the draws to the US study, so it's a positive. While it can seem daunting, it's actually a great thing to know that with so many universities out there, there is bound to be one that is perfect for you, a great fit for you, ticking all the boxes that you want. So when you go through the choosing process, be open-minded and spend time figuring out what is important to you. So second bullet point here, consider funding. We're going to talk about funding later in more detail, but we just want to plug it in here because if funding is important to you, then this needs to be considered from step one of the choosing process. You want to only be applying to universities that offer financial aid to international students. And we'll talk about this more, but please note that this is very important from the start. And as a final note, you can complete UCAS applications alongside US applications. So please do carry on with UCAS, the UK backup plan. That also includes applications that include courses that have a year abroad, but just be mindful of deadlines because they're not going to align with UK deadlines. And like I said before, US university deadlines also vary from institution to institution. So determining your fit. The first step in the choosing process is to locate what factors are important to you. We focus a lot on the term fit and finding what school and program is going to be the best fit for you and your personal and academic interests. There are many factors to consider, both in and out of the classroom. So you might want to think about types of programs and departments, location, availability of funding, campus size, have a look at the academic environment. Is it rigorous, competitive, inclusive, supportive? Is there a big or a small international community, for example? Begin thinking about factors that are important to you more broadly and then prioritize these. For example, don't like the cold and snow, then the East Coast is probably not the best fit for you. You might end up in California. Are you trying to save money though? So living in an urban place will definitely be more expensive than a rural place, and this can also vary greatly from state to state. Do the universities you are looking into match what you want out of them? Ask yourselves the questions that are most important for you, and that will start shaping the kind of university profile you're looking for. There's just a note that we encourage you to think beyond rankings and focus instead on a variety of factors. So rankings in the USA are not the same as in the UK. Some don't rate the quality of teaching at all or graduate prospects, and some give a weight to how much money a university has, or even invites the university to peer rank among themselves. So it's not the same. We cannot compare rankings in the US to the UK. Although they can be useful tools to gather other bits of information, take them all with a pinch of salt and make sure it isn't the only method you are using to choose. Within the choosing process, you want to make sure you're only applying to universities you've researched and could see yourself attending for up to 4 years if offered a place. So, now you know what factors are important to you and what types of institutions are available. The next step is to use that information to begin researching universities. And unlike UCAS, you are not limited to just 5 universities. So in theory, you could apply to as many as you like. You can apply to 100 if you like to. However, all of those applications do take time, and there are financial reasons as well. The applications cost money as well. So we recommend focusing and applying to around about 6 to 10 universities. However, to jumpstart your process of choosing, you want to focus on narrowing down that total of 4,500 plus institutions to a list of about 10 to 20 schools that you think could be a good fit for you. So how do you do this? We have a load of great resources on the choosing section of our undergraduate guide on our website. And this includes a list of links to search engines to help with this process of narrowing down your choice of universities. And we're about to go through an example of one now to show you what this process looks like. One second. So this is one of the search engines linked on our website called Big Future College Search. There is a variety of filters you can use, including type of institution, size of a school, location by state, majors on offer, so that's the subject you're going to graduate in, etc. And this is where, so this tool is where you apply all those factors that are important to you and that you've been thinking of. You apply them into this website. Just note that you are always going to want to double check the information that you gather from Big Future on the university website itself, just to make sure that the information is all up to date and correct. So when you start, you'll see that without any filters, there are over 4,400 universities listed, but let's see how you can apply different filters to narrow down that total. So we've put in a variety of filters to narrow down our list of schools. So we want to attend a 4-year school of less than 3,000 students. And we want to base ourselves in Ohio because we like the look of Ohio. But we also need to make sure that we can afford this. And we need a university in Ohio to meet 100% of our financial need. And as you can see, it's brought down the original number of 4,400 down to just 2 universities that fulfill all those criteria that I just put in. So we've got Denison University and Oberlin College, and you can see there's a quick overview of each. And feel free to play around with the filters as much as you like. And yeah, it's a great discovery tool and a way to start narrowing down those options for you. Okay, so we've decided to go to the Denison website. So we're going to their menu. We're going to admissions and aid, apply for admissions. And then we're going into the international application area. So you have a little blurb there about Denison priding itself of having a 16% international student body. But there's also some more information for you to go through on test optional admission, the fact that they have no fee for admission and they have no supplemental essay that's required. If you scroll down, you have more about their application process, about specific deadlines that may be super important to you, more information that's specific to international admissions, and then finally some information that is on scholarships and financial aid. So all the universities will have similar sections such as this for you to explore. So once you have gone through this process and you've narrowed down your options, perhaps to that list of 15 to 20 universities you're interested in, you can start researching them further on the website, like we've just done. You may even possibly reach out directly to them to get them to answer some specific questions you may have. But like I said, the goal is to select ultimately about 6 to 10 institutions where you actually will submit an application. So we suggest applying to 2 REACH schools where you would be thrilled to attend, but it would be a bit of a challenge for you to get into. Just note here that if you are applying to ultra competitive universities, for example, Yale, Stanford, MIT, Caltech, ETC, these are all REACH schools for everyone. No matter your grades and achievements, just bear that in mind. We're keeping to a maximum of 2 if possible. After that, we're going to apply to 3 to 4 match schools where your profile is roughly on par with their average applicant, and in most cases, you'll be able to find what this average applicant looks like on their website. And therefore you'll be able to compare yourself to them and see if you're likely to be accepted. And then that leaves 2 for likely admittance category. So think of these as your UCAS insurance choices, where your application will be very competitive and you are very likely to be successful. But remember that the best place to find the most up-to-date information is the university website itself. So you should be visiting these regularly. And on the website, you should be looking for the profile of the average admitted applicant, like I mentioned just now. You can find out more information on programs, campus virtual tours, a load on what student life is like. There'll be videos of people interviewing, asking questions, showing you around. What sports do they have? What's their student housing like? Or are you going to be on campus? Are you going to be off campus? For how many years? And finally, the important part, which is what financial aid do they offer. Make sure you check out what resources they have for international students in particular, as different universities will offer different levels of support for their international body. Don't forget about social media. So on their social media channels, you can also get a real good feel of what the college is like. You can discover a load more on the personality of the university and what they are focused on and what their mission really is to the core. And don't forget that universities want to hear from you. Reach out to them, call them, email admissions, and make sure it's the student calling and reaching out, not the parents. So that's a big tip from us. They want to be hearing from the students themselves and not from their parents. And in the next slides, I will show you some examples of schools you might never have heard of, and hopefully show you why it's important to be flexible when going through this choosing process. So welcome to Middlebury College. This is a small liberal arts college in Vermont in the northeast of USA. Vermont has lovely summers and, as you can see, very cold winters. It even has its own ski mountain. It is super well known for its language department, its work on climate change, and with that, climate science as well. And there are top professors teaching this subject at Middlebury College. It's a small university with a focus mainly on undergraduate studies. There are no graduate students, in fact, and the small size means there are lots of access to professors and opportunities to form these close relationships between student and teacher. This is an example of a top uni you might not have ever heard of, but it's very selected to get into. So this is Scripps College. It's located in Claremont, California, just outside of LA. It's a liberal arts college with top professors. It is a college for women or female identifying people only, and is a great space for women to find their voices. It has great programs, for example, museum studies and conservation. It is part of a consortium of 5 universities that share the campus. These universities are Scripps, Harvey-Mudd, Pitzer, Claremont, McKenna, and Pomona. So you might find that when you're attending classes, you're actually sharing the room with people from different universities. And although you're sharing these kind of resources and facilities, each of those universities still maintain that unique identity. Again, it's another great college that offers a range of benefits. And this is Vanderbilt University. This is the last one we will be talking about today. And this is a much bigger university in the middle of Nashville, Tennessee. And some of you might know Nashville as the home of country music. So with this kind of background, community background, it does have a very vibrant campus with a big culture and art scene. It's very green, it's close to downtown, and it has research hospitals, a big engineering program, and all of this contributes to the big university feel. So I just wanted to highlight 3 very different universities that are all great, just in their own unique way, and you might be feeling more attracted to one versus the other just because of your own unique personality and your desires and your wishes. And before we move on to funding, I just wanted to leave you with a note on the Ivy League. So the Ivy League is historically a sports league between the 8 oldest universities in New England. It is not the equivalent to the Russell Group. So I know we hear a lot about the Ivy League in popular culture, in TV, in film, but please do not ever feel or think it's an equivalent to the Russell Group. So no university can actually become an Ivy League. There are a few universities that people in the UK think are part of the Ivy League, such as MIT and Stanford, but they're not. So all universities in the Ivy League are private research universities. So if you are focusing just on Ivy League schools, you're limiting your opportunities to explore other institutions, such as liberal arts colleges that explore that wider curriculum, women's colleges, or specialist institutions. And we actually put Ivy League schools in the ultra competitive bracket, and some have admission rates of about 1% to 2%. So please do be aware of this. To give you an idea of what 1% to 2% is, Oxford has actually got an admission rate of 18% and Cambridge 21%. So this is drastically different. For going from 1% to 2% to 18% and 20% is a huge jump. So bear this in mind when you are making an Ivy League school one of those 10 choices that you're going into. And though we do advise you to look at rankings with caution, as we've already mentioned before, it's important to note that the top 1% of US universities would be the equivalent to over 40 institutions. Liberal arts colleges that are as highly regarded and competitive will be part of this 40%, but will never be Ivy League or as well known in the UK despite it being top quality. And just because you haven't heard of a university doesn't mean it's not a good fit. So again, this is where your research, your time going into all the websites and finding out what makes them special, what makes them different is going to be really, really valuable. And it's good. The university being good is going to depend on what you want out of it. So the big elephant in the room, funding your studies. This is, of course, one of the top things we get asked about. So in this next part, we're going to run through the costs you can anticipate for studying in the US, the different sources of funding that you can pull from, and some of the strategies you can implement to find in funding as well. So what costs should you expect? The first cost to consider is the application expenses. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. So if university requires admission test scores, so the SAT or the ACT, those currently cost between $100 to $200. So it's something that you have to bear in mind when you are financing these applications. On top of that, we have an application fee for each university. So this typically ranges between $50 to $100. So many universities do offer fee waivers, or as we saw with Davidson, some may offer a free application. Like I said, it completely depends on the university, and it's something that you'd have to research yourself when you're going through websites. So you will also incur fees for your visa at some point, your embassy appointment, and SEVIS, which is essentially the international student database that the Department of Homeland Security uses. So you'll also have tuition and other fees associated with the university. So costs can vary significantly since each university can set their own tuition and fee rates. So there's no standardization. They can charge what they want, what they feel is necessary. Fees are mandatory and usually cover things like student union, athletics and memberships to university gym, for example. Just keep in mind that there is a big funding misconception. So do not be put off by the sticker price. You might go on some of these lists and say, oh gosh, that is insane compared to the UK. But don't be put off because there are ways around it and ways of kind of understanding it. So the cost of attendance will include everything, in tuition fees, room and board, any personal expenses you may have. And sometimes it might even include things such as a couple of trips home a year. So train, travel, planes, etc. This is compared to the UK price, which just lists tuition and fees and doesn't take into consideration everything else a student needs to live and exist comfortably in an academic year. So we're also going to obviously expect cost of living and other expenses, which includes health insurance. So while cost of attendance may include room and board and some expenses, you still have to consider these other living costs such as health insurance, eating out, clothing, entertainment. And this can vary widely depending on where your university is located. So the cost of rent will also differ depending on whether you live on or off campus. If you do live off campus, do you need a car to travel into class? Or is there public transport available that will make this a lot cheaper option for you? Like I mentioned earlier, is it urban? Is it rural? What state are you in? It can be completely different from state to state and university to university. And all of this needs to be taken into consideration when you're budgeting and understanding how much you can afford. But there is some good news, as there are a variety of funding opportunities available. It is completely possible to have an affordable US university education, believe it or not. And many students are actually able to fully fund their studies without taking out any loans. That again is in comparison to here in the UK, where the majority of students go through Student Finance England and incur a lot of debt throughout the life of their academic program. But the key is to put the time and effort into seeking out and applying for this funding while staying flexible with your options. So again, 90% of the work should be done in this stage, choosing, looking at your funding opportunities, and only 10% should be on the application itself. So we're going to put a lot of time and effort into this if it's important to you. So where does the money come from exactly? I will go into more detail for each of these sources, but it's good to know that we typically have 4 sources of funding for studying in the US. As you can see, the first is personal family funds. US universities will expect families to prioritize students' education and invest in that education when a child is born. They expect your family to contribute in some form. So please do keep this in mind. Keep in mind that you may be expected to pay something. So again, it's a cultural expectation that when you have a child, you are saving from day dot for their university education. We do not have that kind of mentality and preparation in the UK. So it's a big shift in the way we think. But just to let you know that that's what they are thinking. But again, we'll go into ways that this can become affordable for us here in the UK, where we don't have that kind of saving culture. Another source of funding comes from US universities themselves. So there are 2 types of funding: needs-based aid and merit-based scholarships, which will be explained on the next slide. And the amount of funding will vary greatly from university to university. So again, if financial aid is important to you, you need to look for and apply only to universities offering financial aid for international students, because some do and some don't. So it's up to you to do that research and make sure that they're covering you on that aspect. So there are also external funding bodies, which I will explain a little bit later as well. And finally, there are loans that are not nationalised like Student Finance England, but you can get a loan, but we advise this to be your final resort. You cannot take a UK student loan, so Student Finance England cannot be taken to the US, and US-based loans require you to have a US citizen or a permanent resident to co-sign that loan. You can take UK third-party loans, but we caution you to be careful around these high interest rates and their payback terms. So if you do have US citizenship or you're a dual citizen, you can take out a loan in the US and apply to federal loans through FAFSA. And we have more information on that on our website should you be in one of these two categories. Just keep in mind that it might be that you have to pull from some of these bullet points or perhaps all of these different bullet points to cover your funding. So what is university funding? So this type of funding, uni funding, is ideal since it does not have to be paid back. It is a gift, it is a grant that you do not have to worry about giving back to once you graduate. And there are two types of university funding. There's needs-based aid and scholarships. University funding is likely to be awarded on the basis of financial need, which is based on your family's annual income. Academic merit is also taken into account. So this is based on A-level marks and admission test scores, your academic achievements basically. And then there are other niche criteria such as sports that are taken into account. And it could be a combination of all three of these bullet points that the university decides to fund you on. And there are different types of financial, different types of financial aid, needs-based aid, which is based on what you need. So a needs-based aid is based on financial need, where universities calculate expected family contribution and compare this to the total cost of attendance. They then try and meet this gap. So this is going to vary from university to university. Some can meet 20% of this gap, some can meet 80% of this gap, and some can meet 100% of this gap. So it's important that you look through this information while doing research if you need that funding to get you to the US. So I'm just going to repeat that again. So needs-based aid is based on financial need. So the university will calculate your family contribution, what you can afford to pay for your student, and they will try and fill that gap. But universities will vary of how much of that gap they can fill by percentage. So that's the research you have to do as well. And as you investigate funding, you'll want to watch for information about whether the university makes scholarships available to their international students. As like I said, not all of them do, so make sure that you are checking that out. And as for our top athletes, sports scholarships may also be available through athletic recruitment processes. We're not going to focus on that today, but if you want to find out more, there is lots of information on athletic recruitment on our website. Okay, so as an example of looking at cost of attendance, to kind of make what I've just said a little bit more real and accessible, we have gone to Rice University financial aid page. Rice University is in Houston, Texas, and it's well known for its link to NASA. That's where you might know it from. You can see here that it gives you a breakdown of not just tuition and room and board, but also includes fees, books, personal expenses, such as flights home. So it's really giving you that full cost of attendance. You can see that their sticker price total is just under $80,000, but their average freshman aid package is just under $60,000, leaving a $15,000 difference, which is a lot more affordable then for you to, as a parent or as a family, to fill in that gap. just to note that it's not shown here, but Rice also has a net price calculator to help find out how much need-based aid you might be able to receive, which is available on their website, and it's a very handy tool for you to kind of have a look at and test out. So on their website, you can also find information about merit scholarships and the types of recipients. So here it lists, for example, common recipients are community service leaders, performers, entrepreneurs, and athletes. Also note how the scholarship system is integrated into the admissions process itself. So you do not have to fill out separate forms, or you do not have to undergo separate interviews at all. So when you apply to Rice University, you may automatically qualify for a scholarship, for one of these scholarships, if you meet their individual criteria. So you don't even have to do any more work. They're doing that for you. And again, just to point out, this will vary from university to university. So this is just one example. So this is another page with funding information specifically for international students. You can see that international students are also considered for this need-based aid. So that ticks our box of, will they fund me as an international student? Yes, they will. And they're saying here that 100% of demonstrated need is met with grant aid. So they are filling 100% of that gap that the family cannot afford. They use something called the CSS profile to gather this information about a student's financial background to determine their financial aid package, and there's more information about this on our website. And this is why it's so important to check each website to see if funding is available for their internationals. It always breaks our heart when someone reaches out to us via email and shares that they've gotten into their dream US university, but did not realize that they do not offer funding for international students. So just imagine you get that amazing email in your inbox saying, you've got an offer, but they're not funding you. And unfortunately, at that point in time, at that point in the cycle, when you're already receiving offers, there's not much we can do. And it might be that you end up rejecting that offer due to funding reasons. So once again, funding is an important consideration. You definitely want to ensure there is funding at the university for international students, and be sure to check into this very, very early into your research stage. So right now, right at the beginning. So what are external funding bodies? A bit more obscure to us UK citizens. So funding bodies may include a wide range of professional, charitable, or government organizations external to the university. They can be thought of as niche scholarships, as they have specific criteria based on the mission of the funding body itself. So it might just be that they're looking for students from a particular country of origin, a particular ethnicity, background, religious faith, interest in a specific field, gender, hobbies, talents, etc. For example, you may find an external body that offers scholarships for just women, female engineers. So that's the kind of thing that you can look into and discover a range of niche funding that's out there that you just might fit into. So if you are unique in any way, there is likely a funding body out there with a scholarship that will be perfect. You just have to do the research. Again, you have to find them. You have to go out. Just one example that we're going to talk about today is called the Moorhead Kane Scholarship. So they offer a scholarship based on leadership, character, scholarship, and physical vigor. And they provide a 4-year fully funded educational experience for students of the highest caliber at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So that's just one example of an external funding scholarship. And there are thousands of funding bodies. So searching will require time and dedication to sift through the different listings, and you'll have to submit separate applications to each of these bodies. So it is a little bit time consuming. But for this reason, what we do is we encourage students to apply for university first as your first option. And then if there is still a gap that you feel that you need to fund, then you can go to the external funding bodies and do further research and try and plug in that gap. And again, we have a link on our website to scholarship search engines, which provides a great tool for you to start this journey. So funding strategies. There are 3 different approaches to a funding strategy. You could explore universities in places with a lower cost of living, which is the same in the UK. For example, London will be more expensive than Lancaster, just like New York and California are going to be way more expensive than states like Ohio or Georgia. And American universities will list on their website the full estimated cost of attendance, like we've already said, and that includes tuition fees, cost of living, and personal expenses. So you can scope out places with lower costs of living through doing your research to find a more affordable option if that's what you want to need. And another thing to look at are programs with lower tuition. So as I mentioned before, universities can charge what they like. So there's no standard price, sticker price. But typically, state universities funded directly by the government will be more affordable. So I say typically because there are some private universities that also have very affordable rates. But again, it's up to you to do the research and to find out. And as discussed, you can always look for funding opportunities at the universities themselves. And this is kind of our main go-to and what we suggest you to do first. So have you ever heard of community college? This is becoming an increasingly popular choice in the US for US students as an alternative pathway that can help you save a lot of money and still give you that international experience. So generally, community colleges award what's called an associate degree, which is not a degree offered in the UK, but don't let that put you off. So associate degrees often are more professional and have a more vocational focus. They also, however, have programs that allow students to take a 2+2 transfer pathway. Okay, so starting off with an associate degree, that you might go into what is called a 2+2 transfer pathway. What this means is that students start their studies at a community college and then transfer to a 4-year university, then receiving a full bachelor's degree from that university in another 2 years. So 2 years at the community college plus another 2 years at a 4-year university, which actually means that you will be receiving a bachelor's degree, which is obviously recognized here in the UK and would be the same worth as whether you did the whole 4 years at that 4-year college. And many colleges and universities have transfer agreements between them that make this possibility a lot easier. For example, here on the side, we have, lost it. So we have Los Angeles Valley College. This is a 2-year community college, and it actually has a partnership with 3 universities, UCLA, USC, University of Southern California, and also Cal Poly. And why is this so attractive to students? Community colleges are much less expensive than those 4-year universities. So you can actually save thousands and thousands by paying the significantly lower tuition of a community college for those first 2 out of the 4 years. At the same time, you're accessing much smaller class sizes. So this can be especially valuable for introductory classes, meaning far more contact with the professors. So you really are building up on those relationships and having more one-to-one time with the experts. Also, they generally involve less rigorous application processes, and entry requirements compared to a 4-year university are set a little bit lower. So students with BTECs, for example, or other similar qualifications that aren't A-levels may apply to community colleges, and many do not require admission exam scores for admission. So they do not require SATs and ACTs, and you can get in with BTECs and other vocational qualifications. And if you want more information on the 2+2 model, please do visit our website for more information, including a link to a webinar that speaks specifically to this process. So, funding tips. Since applying for funding is simultaneous to the admissions process, you want to begin your search for funding really early. Bear in mind it will take time to research the funding options at each school you want to apply to, and then also the external scholarships if that's necessary. The best resources for funding are the university websites themselves, online scholarship searches, like I mentioned, we have a list on our website that you can use for free. You should also consider having a funding strategy to help you along the way. And to fully fund your studies, you may need a combination of all three different types of funding that we've discussed. So you may need to use an access family funds, you may go into university funding where they are offering needs-based and merit scholarships, and you may look at external funding bodies as well. So you'll want to investigate each of these to see what will work best for you and your applications. Please remember, it is important to remain flexible in choosing universities. Do not just apply where thousands of other British students apply to, or where you will not be a competitive student. So the fishbowl on this slide is a great visual reminder of this. Be tactical and be competitive. Look at universities that perhaps have few international student applicants and where you'll be sure to really stand out. So now we've come to the end of talking about funding, and I'm just going to hand over to my colleague Abby, who's going to speak a little bit about completing the application process. She'll also bring us towards the end of our webinar, and we will start the Q&A after that. So over to you, Abby.
Thank you. All right, so bear with me while I share my screen. So, okay. So now that you've heard all about how to choose which universities to apply for in the US, you're probably wondering, how does this application process work? What does it look like exactly? So we're going to go through that right now. So some things to consider when filling out and completing your application to a US university. US universities look first for academic achievement, and this is measured by your results. So from your GCSEs and your A levels, as well as admissions test scores, which we'll talk about in just a minute. So you can check the university websites for average applicant profiles in order to be able to compare how you would stand up to their average student and their academic achievement. Same time, and another difference that Louisa mentioned between British and American universities is that academic achievement alone will not guarantee entrance to a competitive US uni because the application process is much more holistic than in the UK. So a few things that you need to consider when you're applying to specific universities in the US. So one would be academic fit. So what are your reasons for pursuing a degree at that particular institution, and how does it help you toward your goals? So for example, maybe you want to be in New York City. There's lots of universities in New York City, but you're deciding between NYU over Columbia, or NYU and Columbia. Why would you choose NYU over Columbia? You need to emphasize that in your application. It's not enough to just say, I want to go to your university because I want to be in New York City, because there are plenty of opportunities to do that. So maybe there's a particular program that one offers that the other doesn't, or is there a campus activity that is available on one campus but not the other? So you can emphasize that in your application. Also, universities each have their own individual missions and values. So a lot of times it can be a good idea to emphasize that you think you fit in very particularly well with one university's mission or values over other universities' mission and values. Another aspect that is big in US university admissions is extracurriculars. So you don't have to highlight everything that you do outside of school, but you definitely do want to highlight the valuable things that you are involved in outside of just academics. And then finally, something that US universities consider in their admissions is your personal attributes. So because it's such a holistic process, they look at the whole person and not just your academics. They're looking to diversify their campuses and classrooms, bring in a variety of backgrounds and experiences and passions as well. So why they want to know who you are? They want to know who you are. So maybe you have a unique interest in your academic field of choice. What are your overall interests? What's your character? What about leadership abilities? What makes you you, and what makes you unique to a US university? So applications, all in all, there's several application components to a US university application. So unlike the UK, you apply to each uni individually rather than a centralized body like UCAS. And students can apply to as many as possible, as Louisa mentioned. But again, for time and cost purposes, we recommend applying to 6 to 10 schools. So there is something called the Common Application, and around 900 universities in the US use the Common Application. So it's just a system to help streamline the generic questions, the demographic questions that they ask at the beginning. But please note that the Common App is not UCAS. It is not the same, and it is not the same in that you will still have to tailor all of your applications to each university you're applying to. And by that, we mean each university will ask some different questions, and there will be supplementary questions to each university's application that, one university will ask something that another doesn't. And there is, as Louisa has also mentioned, there's no standard process for applications, as in deadlines, requirements, etc. So they'll all vary by school. And each university will set its own deadlines, and most applications will follow a similar format. So you are able to use and reuse or adapt the materials you prepare for each one, but we don't recommend that you necessarily copy and paste one school's application to another school. But overall, most uni applications will ask for just a general application form with your basic demographic info, your admissions test scores, a transcript, essays, and 2 to 3 letters of recommendation. And finally, an application fee of typically between $50 to $100 per application. So admissions deadlines, this is something important to keep in mind. So there's a few different types of admissions deadlines in the US. So the first one would be regular decision, which students typically apply by the 1st of January, and then they hear back about the results of their application by the 1st of April. And this type of deadline is non-binding and non-restrictive. So you can apply to as many unis as you like, though I'll note again, we recommend narrowing it to 6 to 10 for financial and time purposes. The second type of deadline is early action. So students typically apply by the 1st of November, and then you hear back about the university's decision by the 15th of December. This type of deadline is non-binding and non-restrictive, which means that you can apply to as many as you like by each university's early action deadline. The third type is called early decision. So there are 2 early decision deadlines, early decision 1 in November and a slightly less common early decision 2 in January. And most crucially, to do with these particular types of deadlines and this type of application is it is binding. So early decision is binding. It should be your first choice, and if accepted, you will withdraw all other applications worldwide and attend that university. So when you apply to a university as an early decision, you are committing, if you get in, to going to that university. There is an exception to that, and that would be if the financial aid is not enough. But usually universities like that a student is applying to their school early decision. It shows that they're very committed, and it can happen that financial aid could be more applicable to your needs, but that's definitely not a guarantee. So just keep in mind, if you apply to a university early decision, you have to attend that university if you're accepted. So overall, there are benefits of applying early. First of all, you'll hear back early, and maybe you'll know by December of your final year of school where you're going to be going to uni. There's a smaller applicant pool, so there's generally just less competition in that first round of decisions. And it shows your interest. It shows you're very committed to their university and you really like it and you want to have a better chance of getting in because you have a higher chance of attending that university in the end. And it can make you quite competitive for funding. So for admissions decisions, timing, if you applied early, you should receive your decision by the end of December, and regular decision, if you applied regular decision, you should receive information if you've been admitted or not. You'll receive that by about April 1st. There are 3 types of decisions. There's accepted, waitlist, and not accepted. So I know in the UK, you might receive something like an unconditional offer, but please note that while US universities do not offer conditional admissions, where you receive certain scores on your final year exams in order to be admitted, keep in mind you will be rewarded for doing well on your final year exams. Many academic departments will award advanced standing for students with A levels, often awarding more university credit the better you do. So bear in mind that in extreme cases, the university may reconsider your admissions if your A levels don't end up being as good or successful as they were predicted to be. So I've mentioned it now a few times, but and so has Louisa, admissions tests. So admissions tests are a general way to standardize results for US students. So in the US, there's no national curriculum at the secondary school level. So it's a way to evaluate applicants from diverse areas and schools and from all the 50 states, as well as the rest of the world. So first thing you'll probably want to do when you visit a university website is check if admissions tests are required. I think we saw on the Denison website that they're still test optional. So a lot of universities have moved to the test optional route since COVID. So if all the universities you want to apply to, if none of them require an admissions test, then I guess you're lucky and you might not have to take the ACT or the SAT. So in the summer after year 12 or the autumn of year 13, before the half-term holiday or 10 to 12 months before enrollment, you'll want to sit one of these admissions exams. Universities typically require either the ACT or the SAT. However, increasing amount are going test optional. There's a list of schools that are test optional on fairtest.org. However, not all are optional for international applicants and students, so make sure you definitely double check that for your specific situation, i.e. as an international applicant. So the SAT and the ACT are different tests, so how do you choose which one you want to take? Just important to note that one is not considered better than the other. It just depends on what test style fits and suits you best. The best way to decide is to take a timed full-length practice test of each type, and there are many free ones of that sort online. So you can just give it a quick Google and you can get test sample questions as well as sample tests to see which one suits you better. So since the content and the style of the SAT and ACT are a little bit different, consider other factors like how you handle time pressure and what types of questions you find most challenging, and that can help you determine which test is the best fit for you. So transcripts, as mentioned, that's something that most US universities will require you to submit with your application for acceptance. So a transcript is a listing of your academic qualifications and marks covering years 10 to 13 in England and Wales, years 11 to 14 in Northern Ireland, and S3 to 6 in Scotland. So a transcript is generated by your school, but you may need to provide your school or your counselor with information about what to include in a transcript, as well as any additional school reports. So for example, your transcript may include the number of years attended at that school, which years you attended at that school, your GCSE scores, and your predicted A levels. So keep in mind that there is no direct conversion between UK and US marks. So the school needs to report your marks in the British system. And when you submit that transcript with your British marks on it to a US university, the US university will use their own conversion method to translate your marks into the American system. So make sure you let them do that, because they each have their own system for translating it as they best understand it. And the transcript is typically submitted online by your school. So a school report, some applications might ask you to submit a school report, and this is just, it just contains information about the school itself for context for the American admissions officers who are reading your applications. And important to note that we have templates for both of these things, a transcript and a school report, available on our website. So recommendation letters are commonly required for most US university applications. So you'll likely be required to gather 2 to 3 letters of recommendation. And the letter should be a marketing tool for you as an applicant. Though referees will have particular areas they can speak to, you may want to direct your referees to write about things like your ability to succeed at university, like your past academic performance, observations about your performance in class or on assignments, school awards, writing and critical thinking skills, subject knowledge, work experience, etc. As well as maybe like your ability to positively contribute to the university department, campus life, the diversity of the university as a whole, your leadership abilities and your character, and your involvement in the school and community. So it's important that you ask someone who knows you well, both in and out of the classroom, to write you a letter of recommendation. The university may provide some loose guidelines for selecting referees. For example, 1 letter from a counselor, but definitely at least 1 letter from a teacher. And it will generally be your responsibility to choose and liaise with referees and give them the necessary information to complete a recommendation letter. So we recommend that you consider meeting with your referee to discuss the letter. It's in your best interest to help your referees write the best letter that they can. So maybe there are some things that you do outside of school that your referee doesn't know about. It could be helpful to meet with them and fill them in on those details. And you may wish to schedule a meeting to discuss your reasons for doing an undergraduate degree, your interest in the particular university selected, your future goals, your academic achievements, extracurricular involvement, all that kind of stuff. That could be helpful knowledge for someone writing your letter of recommendation to know, just so they have a full picture of who you are outside of the classroom as well. So make sure the referee is aware of deadlines and any paperwork that needs to be completed. And it's your responsibility to inform referees of these deadlines and of any required paperwork. So also you need to encourage referees to avoid being restrained and too modest in these letters of recommendation. American referees tend to write in a very enthusiastic tone and use very positive, descriptive language while discussing the applicant both in and out of the classroom, talk about the applicant personally, all that kind of stuff. So keep in mind that what will be written about your American counterparts, what kind of language and descriptors could possibly be used for other applicants who are receiving letters of recommendations, and also applying when preparing your UK referees to write their letters. So encourage referees to refrain from using restrained or modest language. It's a time for them to boast about you. So essays, one of the major parts of the application. So it's arguably one of the most important parts of the application as well for undergraduate study in the US. A strong essay or strong essays can set you apart from other applicants and give you an opportunity to showcase yourself to the university you want to go to. So please keep in mind that a US university essay is not your UCAS personal statement. Rather than submitting an explanation of your interests and achievements in a particular field of study, as you would via UCAS, you'll be asked to respond to between 1 and 3 essay questions on the US university application. Each university will set its own questions as well as desired length for your response. However, just to note, on the Common App system, there will be 1 essay question that goes to all universities, and then there are supplemental questions which are unique to each individual institution. So for example, on the Common App, one of the 7 Common App prompts that would be sent to all the unis you're applying to through the Common App. One example is a question that is, reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. What prompted your thinking? What was the outcome? So another example, describe a topic, idea, or what you would want to do is describe a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging that it makes you lose all track of time. Why does it captivate you? What or who do you turn to when you want to learn more? Further example, it's unlikely that you will be able to compose one essay that will sufficiently answer questions posed by multiple universities. However, many students are able to reuse elements of essays for different universities. So we've got some example here of some of the supplemental essay questions that universities might ask. So this is specific to each institution. And what they are doing with these questions is they want to get an idea of who you are in your essays, but sometimes the questions can show something about that university culture as well. So an example for the University of Chicago, which is known for its comedy, and campus can be a bit quirky, and you can see this in their essay prompts, such as this question, find X, or this one, what's so odd about odd numbers? So these are very abstract questions that they want to see how you answer. And there's no right or wrong answer to these. They just want to see how you think and how you can express yourself. Another example, so this is for Dartmouth College, which is an Ivy League school in New Hampshire. It's also deeply personal about their questions. So it's clear then that this is not your UCAS personal statement. This is not where you need to go on and on and on about your interest in math. US universities want to know who you are as a person, and you can see that through a question like this. When you meet someone for the first time, what do you want them to know about you, but generally don't tell them? All right, so for these very interesting questions and for your essays, there are some writing tips that we have for you. So make sure that you address the question fully. Use clear, concise language to do so, and definitely avoid vague or empty statements and particularly cliches. Just keep in mind that all of these the admissions officers are reading over their careers. They will read hundreds and thousands of applications. So you don't want to be the one who kind of follows along the path of submitting a cliched answer. So try to avoid cliches and things that are a bit disingenuous. And if you reuse an essay, be careful to submit the correct essay to the correct university or program, and double check that all references within the text are to the correct university. I'm sure you can imagine how embarrassing that would be if you apply to a university and throughout your essay is littered the name of a different university. So make sure you proofread extensively and ask others to proofread your essays and offer their feedback as well. Most importantly, though, be yourself. Don't give the admissions officers the answers you think they want to hear. Give them the truth. These questions are designed to discover who you are, so make sure you give them the true impression of who you are. They can see through fake or not very genuine responses. So just think about what sets you apart and let your personality come through in the essay. And we have more writing tips on our website and links to example essays on university websites, which is probably would be a very helpful tool for you to look at to see what kind of unique answers some students come up with. So we have want to go over some other opportunities in the US because maybe you decide that a full undergraduate degree in the US is not for you, but you're still interested in spending some time over there. You can go to so the first opportunity, you can go to the US while at a UK university through a university exchange program and do kind of a study abroad at a US university. Many UK universities have established exchange programs with US universities or US-based study abroad programs. Just one example, the University of Manchester has partnerships with 18 universities in the US. It's logistically simpler as your uni will help arrange everything. And so it can be a good option if you're not interested in doing a full undergraduate degree in the United States. There's also a variety of summer institutes. So for example, the study of the US institutes for student leaders are intensive short-term academic programs whose purpose is to provide groups of undergraduate student leaders with a deeper understanding of the United States while simultaneously enhancing their leadership skills. Or if you really love America, you could spend your degree studying it. American studies programs often include a year in the US as well. So if you decide to stay and study, do your degree in the UK, you could always consider studying an American studies course. There's also internships and summer work through things like BUNAC or Camp America. And then also you could always consider postgraduate study. And we have Fulbright awards for postgraduate study, as well as advice on our website for studying in the US at the postgraduate level. So some ways that we can help here at Fulbright and EducationUSA, EducationUSA. I'm going to talk about other ways that we can help you through EducationUSA, but also the other programs that are offered under the US-UK Fulbright Commission. So first is the Sutton Trust Fulbright US program. So in partnership with the Social Mobility Organization here in the UK, the Sutton Trust, we run the Sutton Trust Fulbright US program. It's a 2-year program for high achieving year 12 students, and you'll have the chance to take part in online sessions and residentials where you will receive support to apply for undergraduate study in the US. And this includes a trip to the US in the summer holidays to visit campuses and learn about life in the US. And this is all completely free if you are selected to be a part of the program. Applications for this year have closed, but if you are in year 11 now, you have plenty of time to look into it for the next year. You can also visit our website for advice, guides, and events under the Education USA Advice tab, undergraduate study in the USA, with details on choosing the right uni for you, information on funding your course, guides on the application process, and tips on what to expect once you've confirmed an offer and begin to prepare for departure. So in the Our Program section, you will find more details about the Sutton Trust program as well. We also offer one-to-one video appointments with an advisor, and you can find that information on our website. And then we also take questions by email. Our email address is advising@fulbright.org.uk, and you can also find an inquiry form on our website. So we also have some events about studying in the US. We hold online events such as this webinar regularly. And if you miss them, we have a range of videos covering different topics on YouTube. We also take part in university fairs across the country. Specifically, one that we want to point out is our USA College Day. So we host our annual USA College Day every year in September. And this year, the event will take place on Friday the 26th and Saturday the 27th of September. This is the biggest event of our calendar, where we invite university representatives from across the US to exhibit at our fair. And it's a free event, and all you need to do to attend is register in advance. If you sign up to our mailing list, you'll receive a notification of when registration opens, but this tends to be in the late summer. All right, so now we will move on to our Q&A portion of the webinar.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Abby. I'm just going to, first of all, pop in our advising email into the messaging. So feel free to copy and paste and save that somewhere. If you are unsure on something we said, you want some clarification, you want some extra support on a specific thing we spoke about today, or something completely unrelated, feel free to email us. Abby and I will do our absolute best to get back to you as quickly as possible. But what we're going to do now is we're just going to turn off our cameras for about 1 minute. Hopefully we'll get some great questions through, so keep them coming. Have a think if there's anything you want us to answer, and we'll be with you in about 1 minute. Thank you so much. Right, thank you all for being so patient and waiting, and thank you all for submitting lots of interesting questions. We'll do our best to answer as many as possible, but like I said, if we don't get around to your specific question, feel free to email us and we'll do our best to help. So Abby's going to start with the first question, and we have here, should you always apply for early application or should you tailor it from university to university?
All right, so I know it can be quite confusing with the different types of deadlines. Don't worry, it's generally a confusing thing. But just to go back to the slide about admissions deadlines, so I think what you were referring to is early action. For early action, you're not necessarily limited to, you're definitely not only limited to one university that you can apply to. It's early decision. That's the one where you can only apply to one university, early decision. And that is the one that if you get in, you're saying, I am going to go to this university. But early action, that's just generally to be considered amongst a smaller pool of applicants. So it's definitely it's a good idea if there's a university you're quite interested in. Early action can be a pretty good decision. Just, keep in mind that that deadline is earlier. So you're going to need to be a bit more on top of taking the time to do your research and taking the time to write your essays and your supplementals and everything like that. But yeah, early action is good. It's non-binding and it's non-restrictive. So you can apply to as many universities you'd like as at early action. All right, so I hope that answered your question.
And just to add to that as well, in general, you should be tailoring your application from university to university. Like we said, each university has a unique profile and you need to be able to fit that profile and demonstrate why you're attractive to them as well. So obviously, Abby's been talking about deadlines, but in terms of the content of the application, please do make sure that you are really answering the specific questions that they're asking and you're fulfilling their criteria and you're making yourself look like an amazing student. Okay, so next we have the question that says, I don't have top grades. Do I have less of a chance of getting into university? Okay, so like I said, there are over 4,500 universities in the US, and all of those will have different ways of measuring like their student profiles, so what they want from a student. So yes, A-level results and BTEC results do matter, but they are also putting a lot of emphasis on things such as extracurriculars. What sports and clubs are you part of? Do you have an active role within your community? Are you an entrepreneur? Perhaps you've started your own mini business. They even want to know if you're a young carer or you have responsibilities within your home. They basically want to know what makes you special and what is it that you spend your time in. Obviously, if you play the Xbox or the Wii Switch, maybe don't include that because that doesn't make you sound unique. But anything that you do in your spare time, put it on the application, and that will help set you apart from other people. So yes, grades do matter. No, they are not everything. They want to know who you are as a whole person. That's what makes this application process a holistic one. They're looking at more than just grades. And also, again, a note to say that different universities will seek different standards. So yes, you may be applying to a university that's more familiar with accepting students with A's across the board for A-levels, but you might have universities that will accept BTECs or a mix of BTECs and A-levels and think that, a C is a pass, so that's great, we'll take you. So do not feel disheartened. If you are not predicted those top grades, have a look at the website. It's up to you to research and to make sure that you fulfill their requirements. And as long as you do fill their requirements and you do fulfill their aspect of fit, then have a go at applying, because you will find guaranteed a list of 10 out of those 4,500 universities that will be a great fit for you in terms of your personality and in terms of your academic potential. So Next, Abby's going to answer a question that says, do US universities have study abroad? And that's a great question because we've obviously talked about study abroad options for UK unis, but what about US unis, Abby?
Yes, they definitely have study abroad. And it will, of course, just like in the UK, it'll vary from university to university, but it is absolutely something that pretty much any US university would offer, or at least attempt to offer. Sometimes it's their own program, and sometimes they work through a third party. But either way, studying abroad is very accessible to American university students. And the best part about that is one, that there's a few good parts. One, you don't have to decide if you want to study abroad while you're applying to university. You can decide that once you're already there. So you don't need to apply with the intention of applying to a course that offers a study abroad. A lot of different courses at American universities will allow you to study abroad. And yeah, that's one of the other great parts of it, is that even if you're studying something that's maybe not a foreign language or something specifically international focused, maybe you're studying engineering, there is a good possibility that you could still study abroad. Some American universities have their own campuses in different countries, which means you can take classes that relate directly to what you would be doing at that university's campus in the United States, but you're just in a different country. For example, my American university had their own campus in Florence, Italy. So it made it much more accessible for a lot of students who are in maybe more unique areas of study, who weren't studying Italian, for example, to actually go and study abroad at our university's own campus in a different country. So yeah, there's tons of opportunities out there. And if you have something specific in mind, there is a very high chance that you will find it. So definitely, if that's a big part of why you want to go to a US university, that's a great thing to consider and to research a little bit. What each university offers in terms of study abroad.
Great, thank you so much. And we have a question here on essay writing, and it says, when answering these essay questions, should we type in American English, so using Zs instead of Ss, for example, and the differences in the spellings of color? So what I'd say is, I don't think it really matters as long as you're consistent, and the most important thing is that your spelling and grammar is correct throughout the whole of the essay. So we're not focusing on Americanized English or English. We're focusing more on the quality in grammar and content of the essay. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. And one for you, Abby. Can you explain how majors and minors work in more detail, and a little bit about compulsory modules across the whole university, and then a little bit about the liberal arts system in general?
Yeah, so the liberal arts system is something that's rather unique about studying at universities in the United States. So when we say liberal arts, not every US university is a liberal arts institution, but a lot of them kind of function on that model. So a liberal arts college would be a college where you take classes in every subject, in all kinds of subjects. So not just the area that you're studying. So your major is basically the equivalent to your course here in the UK. That would be what you are studying. So say you're studying physics, that would be your major. And then US universities offer this opportunity to have minors, which is not what you're not getting a degree in your minor. So say you want to study physics for your major, but you also really like Spanish and you want to do Spanish as a minor. It just means that you take a number of classes in Spanish, you take enough classes in Spanish to achieve this minor, but you're not taking as many classes in your minor subject as you are in your major subject. So you maybe take quite a few Spanish classes and you get that minor, but you're taking even more physics classes to get that physics degree and that physics major. And then the liberal arts component of this is if you're at a liberal arts college, and as the question mentioned, they will have required courses or required classes, required subject areas that you need to take. So for example, my US university was a liberal arts college. So that means if someone is studying engineering, they will also be required to take English classes and foreign language classes and history classes and science classes, and maybe a business class or two. So you are supposed to get a holistic, same with the application process, holistic. You're supposed to get a holistic education and not one that is specified to one area of study. So that's the concept behind a liberal arts. And it's great. It's great if you want to do something interdisciplinary. Maybe you do really like chemistry, but you also really love dance. So you could major in both of those if you want. Or it's also great if you're not 100% sure what you do want to do, because as was mentioned earlier, you apply to the university, not the course. So you can apply to the university and you don't need to know what you want to major in right away. You can take those general required courses first and then decide soon after you start those courses, oh, I really like this. I think I'm going to be a major in this.
Thank you. And yes, just to reiterate, when you apply to university or when you start a university, you do not have to declare your major. So this is not something that you have to. A few select universities will, because it's a very selective process, and maybe a specialized institution will want you to declare your major. But for the most part, this isn't a common practice, and it's typically at the end of your second year that you start narrowing down your focus on what you would like to major in at the end of your 4-year degree. But yeah, thank you, Abby. So there's a question here that says, does the Sutton Trust US program provide scholarships for successful students? So the answer to this is no. So the Sutton Trust doesn't provide a scholarship directly to the students. What it does is it provides tailored advice, one-to-one support for students and help in research for those students to find these scholarships that we're talking about. So no, it doesn't award scholarships directly, whereas what it does do is support the student in finding and applying and hopefully successfully to those scholarships that are available. So there's a little bit of a difference there. Sorry.
No, sorry. Just also to add on to that and address another question in there. EducationUSA is not any sort of funding granting body. We don't have any scholarships to hand out. We're just giving advice and supporting you in any sort of application and research process. And Fulbright does not offer any sort of funding or scholarships for undergraduate study. So just to keep that in mind is that we as an organization don't have any funding to offer for undergraduate students.
Yeah, and we often get questions. We haven't got one today, but we often get questions such as, I've been told if I don't use a third-party counselor service, I'm not going to be successful in my application to the US. Is this true? Absolutely, it's not true. That's why our website is there. It's there to support every student. Like we say, we offer free and impartial advice to students across the UK. It's absolutely possible to successfully apply, be accepted, gain funding, and enroll on a great course in the US. If you follow our website, our tips, we have our email tool, so please use everything that we have available to you. It is 100% possible to make your dreams come true, not to sound cliche. You just have to put the work into it, and that's what this webinar was about effectively. One more question for you, Abby, if that's okay. So it says here, navigating the Common App is a little bit complicated as a UK student. Could you give us some guidance?
Yeah, so, unfortunately, I never went through the Common App as a UK student. As I'm sure you figured out, I am American, so I did go through the Common App as an American. But I mean, as far as navigating the Common App goes, it's very dependent on which universities you're selecting to apply to. So I would just make sure that you you narrow, as we discussed, narrow down the universities that you want to apply to, and make sure you know which essays each one is specifically asking you to write. So if you have any more specific questions about aspects of the Common App that you're kind of struggling with as a UK student, I think it's best to probably email us and we can help you specifically with whatever you're specifically working on or struggling with in the Common App. But with the Common App, I think, as we've noted, you don't want to treat it in the same way that you might treat UCAS. It's asking for different things. So yeah, I think just make sure you know what each you've already narrowed down your universities enough that the Common App isn't too overwhelming, because as we said, it's about 900 universities that use the Common App. So keep in mind, within the Common App, you select a certain number of universities to apply to. If you submit a Common application with the Common App, you're not automatically applying to all 900 universities that use the Common App. So just make sure, as we've mentioned, you're tailoring to each university that you want to apply to through the Common application. I hope that makes sense.
And I've got one here that says, I've been accepted into a US university pre-college program. Will this stand out on my application as an international student and help with demonstrated interest? It's a bit of a tricky question. I think this one will depend on what university you're applying to and how competitive that university is. So yes, it will definitely show your interest in study there. Yes, if it's some competitive pre-college program to get onto, it will show obviously a certain level of tenacity and achievement on your behalf, but it just completely depends on the university that you're applying to and how competitive. If it's an ultra competitive university, for example, it may have less weighting in the final say. But there's no reason not to do it because it sounds like a great opportunity for you. So yeah, good luck with that. Let me have a look. There's one here that says, what are the best ways international students can earn scholarships or financial support, both from universities themselves and external sources? So again, this is similar to the question we had before. It completely depends on the university. Each university will have a different way of managing their scholarship system. For example, the example we saw at Rice University, you don't even have to apply separately for their scholarship. You just have to show what a fantastic student you are through their normal application process, and then you will either automatically be taken into account for those areas or you won't, depending on what you look like as a student. But a bit like Abby said with the application process and some things that I've mentioned before, it's all about what makes you unique and what makes you stand out from the crowd. So what are your extracurriculars? What kind of person are you? Why do they want you? And also you have to demonstrate why you want that university as well. So making sure that you are a great fit for each other, and that, if they're investing in you as a student, what can you give back to the college experience? What can you give to the university? Because at the end of the day, they might be investing hundreds of thousands of dollars in you. So they want to make sure that you're going to be a fantastic addition to their campus. So yeah, just if you're not into extracurriculars, if you've got some interest but haven't quite had the opportunity to explore them, now is the time to do that. Now is the time to show them what a great student and what a great person outside of school and academics you are, so that you can include that in your application and be competitive in terms of scholarships. Of course, if you're talking about academic and merit-based scholarships, those A-level results are going to count for something. Anything you can do on the side, they love EPQs, for example, would also be of value as well.
And I can address a little bit more on that. As far as like external scholarships go, some of them are incredibly niche. Like maybe they're looking for a female studying business who also wants to incorporate dance into their future. You know, like sometimes they are very, very, very niche. So if there's a chance that you might fit into what they're looking for, and that just narrows down the pool. And I think it goes back to this. You want to be a big fish in a small pond versus a small fish in a big pond. So, and the same goes for applying to certain universities. You know, where can you also stand out?
Perfect. And I'm going to go with two more questions. The first one is, what are some common mistakes international students make that we should avoid? This is a great question. And I think most of the mistakes shine through in the essays. I don't know what you think about it, Abby, but when we write personal statements for UCAS, they are so different to the types of essays that colleges, ask you to answer. Abby read out some examples earlier. They could be as vague as this or that. I mean, they really want you to think outside the box. But the danger you have here as an international student, not as used to writing essays that are a little bit more creative, a little bit about who you are as a human being, and not about academics, not about necessarily the subjects you're interested, but what makes you, is that if you're not careful, you can sound a bit cliche, like Abby said, a bit disingenuous. So you still want to make sure that whilst yes, you're exploring, you're being creative, you are being true to yourself, and yeah, you're showing off that aspect of yourself in the correct way. But like we said, there are some example essays on our website, so please do go and have a look, and you can see what we mean by kind of that abstract portion of essay writing that you will have to engage with. Yes, anything to add on that, Abby?
I think that a common mistake that you can work to avoid is not looking for funding from the beginning. I think Louisa mentioned it. We get emails all the time about, saying, I've got accepted to this university in the States. I'm so excited to go, but I can't afford it. And it's terrible that is what would prevent someone from being able to go and study at their dream university in the US. So it all is very strategic. And maybe you have a dream university in your head right now, but you haven't done enough research yet. And you might find another dream university that is more able to support your dream in the sense that it can provide the funding that you need. So I think it's about prioritizing when you're picking a university to apply to. And we want to make sure that you have all the option to say yes to your admittance to your acceptance to a U.S. university, and that something like funding doesn't preclude you from being able to study in the USA if that's what you really want.
And finally, I'm not going to leave this space in this question without mentioning Ivy Leagues again. I know I've gone on about it for quite a while, and we're not telling you not to apply to Ivy Leagues, but again, a note to say that Ivy Leagues are reached for every single applicant, no matter your background, no matter your grades. It doesn't matter if you've got 10 A stars, that is always going to be a reachable view for an acceptance rate of 1 to 2%. That is very low, and I'm not exactly sure the exact number of applications received last year, but they are incredibly high. So not saying no, like we said, pick 2 reach universities, but each application takes time, so make sure you are putting as much effort into that middle category where you feel like you can comfortably attain and be happy and are excited about just as much as those 2 reach universities that you may apply to. And remember, they are not the equivalent to Russell Group University.
Yeah. So even if they're not Ivy League, don't think that because Stanford's not an Ivy League university, it's any easier. So there are some that are not Ivy League that are extremely competitive to the same level that the Ivies are. But we really just want to emphasize that there are thousands of universities so many fantastic ones in the States where you will be at home and where you could really find your community. So don't, limit yourself to only names that you've heard of. Do your research and you'll find some really great places.
And on that note, just to end, I'm going to ask a question for Abby, seeing as she is our wonderful advisor from the States and has had that experience of going through the college system. What would be the standout kind of aspect of your liberal arts education? What did you enjoy the most? Or about campus life or anything like that?
Yeah, so I think this is something that a lot of universities in the US will definitely try to highlight, but my favorite part was the community on campus. So I was able to go to a smaller university, which is something that I wanted. It's not something that everybody wants, but I was able to go to a smaller one. So that means mine was about 5,000 undergraduate students, but sometimes in the US you can find one as small as 1,000. So you can find really small universities, and that's what I valued because the community was so tight knit and supportive. So amongst my social circle, but also amongst the professors and employees who worked at the university. And you could really feel the pride that we all had in our university. And that just fosters such a fantastic environment on campus, and everybody is just very happy to be there. So I think that is what I really appreciated. And then, yeah, the flexibility of the liberal arts. I went into my university experience, I didn't know what I wanted to study. So I was able to do that, which is something I'm very grateful for, because making decisions is extremely stressful for me, as it is for many people. So I didn't have to make that decision right away. So I'm glad I tried that, and I got to take a bunch of cool, interesting classes my first semester while I was still deciding, and it helped me solidify that I feel confident, choosing this one course of study because I've had experience with other ones, and I think this suits me the best. And then, yeah, I feel like I came out of my liberal arts university experience with quite a well-rounded academic resume, because I did take classes in everything: math, science, history, English, foreign language, politics, all of that, and business as well. You can really have that flexibility. So I'm definitely quite grateful for that. But I would say overall, my favorite part that a lot of universities will emphasize as well is the community that they foster on campus, and the support that the university provides for creating communities like that are really, really strong and integrated.
Great. Thank you so much, Abby. And thank you everyone for those great questions. And with that, we've come to the end of our webinar. Like I said, feel free to email us on advising@fulbright.org.uk, and we'll be happy to help you with any additional questions or queries you may have. Have a great evening and enjoy the last bits of the sun. See you later.